Good morning, guys. Today's video is the last installment of my sort of allotment series where in part one I took some sort of weedy sort of ground and yeah, basically I've turned it into what is hopefully going to be this year a productive growing space. So do check out the first sort of part one and part two of this video series. But yeah, we're going to carry on with the show. So for those of you that haven't got time to watch part one and part two, this was basically just a weedy pasture. It hadn't been cultivated for a number of years. And basically what I came in and did is I mowed it a few times. I then sort of marked out where my beds were going to go by just digging around the edges of them to sort of create a kind of channel that will separate the paths and the beds. I laid down a lot of plastic weed membrane because there's a lot of perennial weeds here, and I think even if I tried to do it with just cardboard and then maybe wood chip on top, I don't think it would be enough to suppress the weeds. So I've gone for a plastic weed membrane. I've then put down a sort of wood chip path. Happens to be a sort of conifer wood chip, but that's fine. You know, this will all break down, and sort of by the time I'm planting it, it should all be fine and good to go. And then what I did is I put down cardboard where the beds are, so it's just cardboard on top of the soil. And what I'm doing now is putting down the sort of compost, and yeah, we'll talk about that a bit more. So in terms of setting up your allotment, you kind of got two options. You've got the traditional approach, which is basically a lot of effort and a lot of digging. The idea would be that you would dig the soil, you turn it or rotivate it, which breaks up the soil, gets it nice and light and fluffy. You pull out all the weeds, you pull out all the sort of weed roots as well. And you know, then you'd maybe incorporate some manure or compost into it. And that's the traditional method. But the other method is no dig. The idea with no dig is that you lay down some kind of cardboard or something and then put compost on top. The cardboard breaks down, and you know, as the sort of roots of the plants that you plant into the layer of compost sort of grow, the roots will then reach into the soil. So the way I see it is one of them's a lot of effort, one of them's less effort, and I think the results are at least comparable, if not, you know, the same. So really that's your sort of options for creating beds, you know, when you're starting an allotment. Now, like most things in life, there are advantages and disadvantages to both methods. With a sort of no dig method that I'm doing here, the big advantage is you sort of preserve the kind of soil life. It's quite well understood now in terms of like the science behind it, that there's a lot going on in soil in terms of like the fungi, bacteria and things. And by doing this, I leave it all very undisturbed so that the benefits of the sort of symbiotic relationships between fungi and plant roots and the bacteria stays intact, and my plants benefit from that. Now, the big sort of disadvantage of this method that I see is cost. I've basically had to spend £60 here really to fill up 4 beds with enough compost that is going to provide a weed suppressant and also enough room for my plants to grow in. Whereas a traditional method, you could probably get away with a lot less compost and still get the sort of harvest and things. So that's the way I see it. But I don't think there's a right or wrong way of doing anything in gardening. But the way I see it with no dig, like I said earlier, the level of effort for really the same sort of reward. And I think that's why I'm going to do no dig here. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about in detail kind of what I'm doing here. What I've got here is basically green waste compost, and that's the compost that your council recycles and sells to different builders and landscapers and things, and you can buy it yourself. I've bought mine from a builder that gets it from the recycling centre that is supplied by the council. Now the compost here is really nice and fluffy. It's really nice and dry as well. It must be kept in a warehouse or something, but that's brilliant for what I've got. There are a few little bits of plastic in it, and again, it's just when you see them picking them out. You know, people can get very worried about microplastics and things, but I still think there's probably less plastics here than the food I would be eating elsewhere potentially. So yeah, all I would say is obviously I'm sort of raking out to get it nice and sort of level and things, and then what I am doing is I'm firming it down either with the sort of front side of my rake, or I'm even stepping on it. Because this is compost, I haven't got to worry about compacting it. It's really difficult to compact compost because it's quite an organic springy matter, whereas if this was soil, I wouldn't stand on it, because when I stand on soil, because it's sandy and clay, it's going to compact, it's going to then stop being free draining. Whereas the compost, it won't really matter much. As soon as I sort of step off it, it'll spring back and sort of rough up again over time. But yeah, I'm going to get on with this, and then we'll take a look at the end result. Now, before I show you the end result, I want to talk a little bit about cost and time. How much this cost me and how much time it took me to set up the allotment. Now, I forgot to film this segment at the allotment, but I made a few notes as I've been going, which I'll just sort of share with you guys, and I'll put some stuff up on the screen as well. So in terms of cost, the first sort of cost that's going to be reoccurring every year is how much it cost me to rent the allotment. So I'm quite fortunate. From the council, it's £25. So it's £25 every year. Now, in terms of setting up the allotment, one of the first things I did was obviously just mow and sort of dig the thing. So there's a certain cost in if you had to buy the tools, but I didn't have to buy any tools. I had all the tools myself. And if you didn't, I would advise things like Facebook Marketplace and things like that, where a lot of people are just giving this stuff away for free. So I'm pretty sure you can make do with whatever you've got. And I don't think there's any cost in terms of tools. Next thing is the weed membrane. Now this did cost. I bought, I think it was a 2 by 25 meter sort of roll for £40. Now I don't think I used the full amount. I only used maybe 3/4 of it. So for me it was £30 in terms of cost. Cardboard got free from work, £0. The wood chip, as I discussed in I think part 2 of this series, was £0. If you were to buy it, it's going to cost you somewhere for about 3 tons, potentially somewhere around between £60 and £100 is what I've sort of researched. Now, compost. Compost was the quite big expense, and that was £60 for a 1 ton bag, which gave me enough to cover the sort of 4 8-foot by 4-foot beds. And what I'm looking for there is quite a thick layer of compost, so you do need quite a lot. So that's cost, and I'll put the totals up on the screen as well. But really, in terms of setup, it's about £100 plus the £25 for the allotment. Now, in terms of time, because time is money, it did take quite a bit of time, this, and I've worked fairly efficiently, but I'm going to break down the time. So the first thing I did was I did a couple sessions where I was just mowing the whole allotment, just cutting over it, just trying to basically kill any of the really established weeds and get everything quite nice and level. So I probably spent about 2 hours doing that. The next bit of time was marking out the beds. Probably maybe took me an hour just to sort of mark them out, dig around the edges of them, and just sort of map out the allotment of where the beds were going to go. Potentially planning, maybe another hour on top. So maybe 2 hours overall for sort of marking out the layout. Now, laying the membrane, really it's just rolling out and cutting it to size. So maybe 2 hours I spent doing that. And the next thing was laying the wood chip. Now I think I probably spent about 6 hours doing this, because I had the wood chip on my drive and I had to be transporting it to the allotment and back and forward doing lots of trips. But I think if you had the wood chip delivered there, I reckon you could do it in maybe half that time. So between sort of 3 and 6 hours. Laying cardboard, maybe, I don't know, half an hour just to sort of peel off the sellotape and things and lay the cardboard on where the beds were. And then finally, putting all the compost, raking it, and sort of finishing the whole allotment, maybe about 3 hours. So again, I'll put the totals up on the sort of screen, and that total is going to vary quite a lot. I think if you're fitter and healthier than me, you can do it a lot quicker. And obviously if you're not, then maybe it's going to take a bit more time. But that's a rough estimate of how long I think it would take to sort of set up an allotment. So yeah. So there we are, guys. This is the end of the sort of allotment setup series. Part 3 is done. All the beds are filled, sort of leveled, patted down. It'll be great to get some sort of rain on these beds so that the compost sort of settles, and I can then maybe have another sort of rake of it just to sort of level it out a bit more. But yeah, this is sort of ready for planting. And do subscribe to my channel, because what I'm going to be doing this sort of growing season is planting a lot of squashes here and a lot of sort of low maintenance crops. Hopefully potatoes, carrots, maybe parsnips, leeks, those sort of things that once you plant, you sort of leave them alone and they're there in the ground. So yeah, I really hope you like these videos. Don't forget to like and subscribe. See you all soon for more videos.